Hello, everyone. Welcome to Two Wizards and a Mic, where a couple of old dudes talk about D&D because they've been playing it for such a long time. They think, maybe, just possibly, there might be something that we've experienced that's worth sharing to make your time at the table so much better. Something like that. Or we just like to talk about D&D. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, Shane, how are you?
I'm not doing too badly today. I have dodged the cold of the world, it seems. So I'm quite happy about that.
Nice.
Um, and I've recovered from my shots, which is even worse. But hey, I want to ask, do you have an update on the Kickstarter to start off?
Yes, actually, I was talking to our whole team today, which means I was talking to two other people from the
Cool.
Monsters of the Dungeon book. We'll put the link below. You can still pre order it. It's the last book in our monster series. I was talking to the artist and I was talking to our layout, graphic design genius, and one of them actually, I'm here in Vancouver, and they're both in cities in the United States. So we were all chatting, and yeah, we're at the very last stage. So I will have a final look at the book today and tomorrow, and then send any last notes. And it's basically done. I'm just going to do a final check. And yeah, it looks amazing. I think it's probably the best book we've made. And I think it has the greatest range for players and dungeon masters in the kind of creatures that we've put in there.
Nice.
There's scary creatures, there's simple, really low level creatures, there's ridiculous creatures, there's very strange aberrations from other worlds. There's undead that are going to freak your party out. So
Out of the entire monster series, how many creatures are there? But I want to say like 600 and something.
yeah, they're including this new book. There's now 676. And
And
then
of course, the next book, you can take those monsters and put them in that world.
exactly. I was just going to say we actually now have the cover, the ink version for the new book for the World of Mir book, which we
Nice.
should be kickstarting in November, and that is going to be a place where you now can play with all these creatures plus all the classic monsters. And as I mentioned before, it'll be for any system. It won't just be for 5e, and it will be really open to people who want to homebrew. You want to drop a
Nice.
giant's adventure in somewhere, pirates, um, bandit lords, whatever you want. There's space in there to do it.
I've always wanted to make an adventure where the party primarily stays in a body of water rather than being on land. I've always
Mm-hmm.
thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, not water world interesting, but there's some sort of reason that they're having to stay out there for the entire adventure. And
Right.
so, yeah, homebrewing something in the world of Mir.
Yeah. Well, there is definitely something new, which because I've finished most of the world book, but there's one section I'm still working on. And it's funny you mentioned that because part of that extra area is a big underwater world.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's occupied by the Aquarian race, which we put in the Monsters of the City book. And yeah, it's going to really bring a new element because some of these creatures have now moved onto land and actually basically, infiltrated or immersed themselves in the humanoid world on land. But their base and their leadership and all the hundreds and thousands of more of these creatures are still in this underwater city. Um, yeah, so that kind of element is something we're looking at. Um, yeah, who knows? Maybe you end up writing that adventure.
I see what you're laying down, I hope.
Yes.
So, look forward to that, everybody, because there's so much I want to do. Not enough time in the day. But today we're talking about books. Books that you should have, books that you maybe take a pass on,
Yeah.
but essentially, those are we're going to talk about the official books that Wizards of the Coast does print for maybe not much longer. I don't know. But yeah. So Andrew, start us off.
Sure. So we're going to look at, the most useful official books from TSR and Wizards. TSR was the original company, um, tactical studies, tactical studies. Anyway, I can't remember the last part of that name right now. But the original company, because nobody ever used that name, everybody just said TSR. So
Yeah.
we're going to look at books that we think are still useful. Um, playing This could be if you're playing fifth edition, if you're playing Dungeon Crawl Classics, if you're playing old school essentials, if you're playing Pathfinder. Um, yeah. So we're going to look at first fifth edition books. And a great book, I think, is still very useful, is the original Dungeon Master's Guide. So I have this is the drive-through RPG copy with this funky cover. It's not the original version. But this book is so filled with resources. A lot of it is copied in the new version of the Dungeon Master's Guide, but the original one has that and more. I mean, it's got a great section on alignment. It's got a great full section on weapons and armor. A lot of detail about hiring henchmen or hench people. Um, and this is a very cool aspect of the game, I think, that is sort of being lost. It really helps when you go adventuring to to have as many people as possible,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
just for carrying your supplies and carrying treasure, for scouting. It's really, a really useful part of the game. It's mentioned very briefly in fifth edition in the player's handbook. I don't think it's even in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I could be wrong, but I know in the original one there's a lot of detail. There's a lot of detail about gameplay. There's even little things like a gambling section and a section of handling intoxication, which our game groups, we always have to deal with this. I mean
Oh yeah.
the characters, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Not the players. Never.
No, never, never. That wouldn't happen. There's a cool section about world building, and even one about looking at social class and the titles of royalty. So if you like classic fantasy, it's very useful. There's traps, great dungeon dressing, even herbs, like a whole detailed chart about herbs and spices. And then it one about descriptions, how you could describe things to the players. So I still think it's the best Dungeon Master's Guide, easily. So I
That's
think,
actually very helpful. I have a vague memory because I've long lost my DM's guide from back then, but I even remember like the original Red books. Like they had a lot of description and how to, as you said, describe stuff to players because you don't want to give out everything. You want to give just a
mhm,
little tiny bit. And I think that that's a skill that's learned over time. Like I think initially, uh, when I started playing, I remember reading the
the
little
box
stuff in the
set.
box there.
Yeah.
But as you get better at it, you can of course add a little flourish. You don't need to describe every single molecule in the room, but there's going to be a lot of different elements that might just add a bit
Mhm.
to the world. Like the herb stuff. I mean, I don't remember if that's even in fifth edition, is it?
No, I
I
don't
don't.
think it is. I don't think there's any detail about that. It might be in the dungeon dressing section at the back of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Um,
Right.
yeah,
But
part
there's
of it
things
is
like
that,
that that's important. Heraldry
yeah,
too, as you said.
part of it is that if I know something's like I already, I still remember what's in that original Dungeon Master's Guide. So if I know it's there, I'm not going to really look for it again.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I don't think there's herbs. Let me just look. No, I can't find it. I don't think there's anything in the fifth edition. And I think those details, like you say, the little details, the smells and the tastes and the plants and all that, I think the weather, all those kind of things really help. You don't have to be these, very precocious, pretentious dungeon masters who use I won't mention anybody in particular, but people who use two or three adjectives for every sentence and this kind of stuff, it's totally unnecessary. You can just say, you know, the odor, the smell in the air of the tunnel is a bit musty, and
Yeah.
then maybe half an hour later you can mention, there's a bit of water dripping along the stone wall, or there's a pool of water on the ground. You don't have to do this you know, fake actor kind of stuff, right? Like,
Well, exactly, and that's the thing, right? Is that you want the players to ask questions. You want them to be able to go, because you could say, "Oh yeah, the ground looks a little wet. It's a little busty. You kind of smell something rotting in the somewhere in the dungeon." But it's like people know what rain smells like after they've
yeah,
gone outside and stuff like that. So it kind of forces them to go, "Oh, okay, it's wet. All right. I wonder why it's wet." If they ask, "Hey," because you could say, "It looks like there's water coming down from the blah blah blah." It could be saliva, could be
mhm,
anything else.
mhm.
But if they don't ask, then uh they don't live very long.
Well, the way you asked that, I think, is so, dead on, because a lot of people who talk about the game often forget, they often come from the dungeon master's point of view, and they forget that about the players. The players actually count. So when
Yeah.
you're the dungeon master talking or giving details, the players are actually there, and they're using their imagination and participating too. They're creating the world in their mind as well. So you don't have to give every detail every time in every description, because those players are doing it for themselves too. You just have to be
Yeah.
a guide along the way, right? You don't have to. I mean, part of that is my personality, because I don't like leading, even in our books, I don't lead people through every step of the way. Like in our books, there's no introduction to the book going, "Hi, this is how you use this book. And we're so glad that all these people participated in creating it. And we feel so honored and treasured that we've been through this experience together. And we really want you readers to understand how to use this book." Like, come on.
That is so what I hear in my head. Like I can see the text on the page. I could like I always call it the nod. Like, or sorry, no, the shake, where people go and say they're talking very serious and then they go, "And then," or something, and it's like, "What are you doing? Please.
So
You
just
don't need to sell us. We're already here."
yeah, just like our books, for the most part, the monster books, you open up, there's monsters pretty much right away. And we don't give you a lot of fluff in describing the creatures. And I think the same for DMing and giving descriptions. You don't have to do all the fluff, you know. Um,
Exactly. Like we already know, and it's going to be this and that. Please
yeah,
continue.
another fantastic book. My favorite monster manual from an official source is from TSR, the Monster Manual 2, also my favorite cover by Jeff Easley. So this book is filled with amazing creatures, really good art. And was the sequel to the original Monster Manual, and it has a lot of unique creatures and creatures that now are part of the game. Um, there are, for example, um, the Cloaker. You know, actually, is the Cloaker? Hold on. Yeah, the Cloaker's in here. The Behir. Um, there's a lot of creatures that have become part of D&D lore. There's a lot of great demons and devils in this book. There's the Duergar, um, Driders. It's just filled. The Fomorian giants, these weird giants that live in the underworld. There's a lot of great monsters, and I love the art. It's a lot of the original artists from TSR, a lot of Jeff Easley, but there's other artists in there as well. Larry Elmore. Yeah, it's fantastic. I still remember the day I bought this book, which was,
Just last year. Yeah, 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 yeah.
43 years ago or something like that. So
I
that
I wish I had cared for those books way better than I did as a kid. Oh my lord.
yeah,
I want to go back in time and be like, "Hey Shane,
yeah.
hey, heck, Protect your D&D gear. Um, yeah, Monster Manuals 1 and 2 definitely are worth about $300 a piece nowadays if you're not getting a reprint, if you're getting an original.
Yeah, yeah, there some of them, yeah, people will try to rip you off on some of these old books for sure. Um, so that one does have a lot of creatures. Some of them have been redone for 5e, but there's creatures in there that haven't been, and there's also different information. I would recommend that still for Dungeon Masters to use. Another one which took a long time to grow on me, it was the third original Monster Manual. It's called the Fiend Folio.
Yep, that
This
is
one,
the one that I just got an original copy of last year.
oh wow.
Someone, I had a friend who's like, "Shane, you're amazing. Here, take this book," and I'm like, "Oh my, really? Hardcover and
I
everything?"
didn't know you were friends with Lauren Michael, or is that
Yeah, I
Doctor
know
Evil?
exactly. Yeah.
Probably was Doctor Evil. I'm sure he played D&D. So the Fiend Folio, so it wasn't actually by the American office, the main office of TSR in the 80s. It was actually the British, the UK division, which was new and smaller, and a lot of really weird and kind of darker creatures. And when I first got it, it was not my thing. And over the years, it's kind of grown on me. I like it more, and it definitely gives me inspiration for creatures, especially making all these monster books. And it has some creatures that have become, part of D&D too. Some really weird, odd creatures like the Gith Yankee, um, the Drow, some really archetypal like in terms of D&D archetypal creatures.
Yeah.
Um, so that's another really good one. The good news about that, Shane was saying you've got a new copy. You can actually get that soft cover print. That's what that is. You can get a soft cover print from Drive Through RPG still, um, which is really good news. And the last one for 1E, we were talking about our World of Mir earlier, which is really inspired by this setting. It's the World of Greyhawk box set. You can still get the books on Drive Through RPG. And this is a setting Gary Gygax created. It's very detailed, very realistic, and a great one where you can put your own adventure in. You don't have to follow every single part of the lore that's in there. You don't have to follow what's going on with the politics and all that. It's a great template for any dungeon master to use to put their adventures in. And then a lot of the original adventures, they are tied into Greyhawk as well.
Yeah, I remember most of the stuff that I played as a kid was Greyhawk based, or homebrew.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I traveled around that a lot, a lot.
Yeah, I love it. It makes so much sense to me. The names are realistic for the most part, like you're able to pronounce them, unlike Forgotten Realms. And it just seems more organic and more realistic the way that it's built. I think the cities usually are still too big to like a medieval city. Once you're around 10 or 20,000, maybe a little bit more than that, that's about realistic in terms of how they were built. Some of these are much bigger than that in Greyhawk, but again, it's a fantasy world. Not every little rule has to be perfect. I think it still works.
Yeah, because I remember. I mean, the big attraction for me when I was younger was uh, the fact that when I got my Greyhawk set, it had the fold out map,
Yeah.
and I hung that on my wall for years. And then I became a teenager, and I think I recycled it or something, or threw it out or whatever. But yeah, I mean, granted, I had beat it to crap. It was like falling apart, along the seams and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, exactly. I wish I still had mine, but I stared at that thing and planned all kinds of stuff. It was the first time I'd ever really had seen the hexagon layout on the
Yeah.
paper, and because I remember buying, I think at the time my parents bought. I remember I needed graph paper. I needed to have the hexagon paper. And they bought me a
Right.
ton of that stuff, and I was like drawing and copying, and oh yeah, it was the map right off the bat was like the first thing that got my gaming sort of head on, and uh, then yeah, I missed that. I have no idea what happened to it. I have a clue. Long, long gone. So I mean, I knew what happened to the map, but the books, who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah, 100%. That map was on our basement wall for years. And like you said, it's so inspiring. I believe the artist, her name is I think she just goes by Darlene. I think you can still find her on social media in the Greyhawk kind of community. But a great setting, great lore if you want to use it. Just feels so real. It's very well thought out. And there's also a whole bunch of adventures that I've mentioned before that I think would be useful still and fun and easily. They're very easy to convert these back and forth to different systems. The A1 to 4 series against the slave lords is a great series for especially starting characters, and same with the U1 to 3. Again, that series was made by the UK division of TSR. So both of those are great early adventures. There's tons more. You can get almost all of them on Drive Through RPG. You can get printed versions, and it's not that expensive. So I would highly recommend all of those. Avoiding, I would avoid, like, I don't think it's super necessary anymore, partly because things have been duplicated. The Player's Handbook, the original one, great book. Not essential though, with if you have the 5e book, if you're using those rules. Um, the old system, as we've mentioned before, in my opinion, a few other people's opinion, 1e is a great system, but it's pretty crunchy. And we find 5e more smoother and more efficient. Um, there is better information in this book on classes and races, I think, and it's more realistic because the races have modifiers so that dwarves are more sturdy, hardy creatures, which makes common sense. So they get a bonus for that. And elves are quicker, more agile, so they get a bonus for that. Um, Creatures that like half orcs aren't as intelligent. These, remember, are fantasy creatures. Um, Another thing I would avoid are the survival books. There's the Wilderness Survival book, this one, and the Dungeoneers Survival book. Those are they're just not. I don't think they're organized as well as they could have been. There's a few other books put out by third-party companies that I think are a little bit more organized. There's some good things in there, but for the most part, I don't really look at those anymore. The original Monster Manual has classic creatures, but basically they've been duplicated in the new Monster Manual.
Yeah.
And the art in the original Monster Manual is very hit and miss. There's some great art, and then there's some art that's not spectacular. The cover itself, there's something again that grows on you over time. I think technically maybe it's not the greatest art, but it has this element, this mythic element to it that gives it something special.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think it's necessarily a book that would be needed at the table, unless, of course, you're playing first edition. All right, so that's first edition covered. 5e, we should say that, or I should say, in my opinion, the art in 5e is not nearly as good as a lot of the original art. And the quality of the books in general started off at a fairly decent place, and that changed over
Yeah, I
time.
mean, the main complaint I have about with the newer books, like in the last say 5 years or so, um, as I've collected them over time, because I mean I've told you this story before, but for those listening, I walked into my local bookstore. There was a stack of Wizards books on the ground, and I thought, what the heck? And I'm looking at the
Yeah,
clock. It's like 5 minutes to closing. I'm like, no one's. I can't believe the number of books that are here, but they were closing, so I left. Then I came home, and I'm like, I don't need all these books. I could just buy them later on, and but they're all like really cheap, and they were selling them for like $20 a piece, kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And then I went back at like 10 a.m. the next day, right at opening, and because my spouse was like, "Just go and get the stupid books. What do you? They're just who cares?" I'm like, oh, okay. So off I went, having permission to buy books, and yeah, and I picked them all up, and and now that that was about a year ago. So over the last year, I've gone through a bunch of them, if not all at this point.
Mhm.
But I did notice, like looking at some of these books, I'm like, the it's basically rehashing old stuff that I know I've read in the past. So I went to some of the older books that I still have. And yeah, it's the same adventure. It's just basically updated to 5e,
Mhm.
but they didn't they didn't make it 5e its own. Like they just kind of
Mhm.
it's like they don't have writers there. They don't have the creativity anymore to create things. Now, I mean, things like Volos, Xanathar are books that are actually good, but a lot of the adventures, a lot of some of like even the wilderness, not the wilderness. What do they call it in 5e? I've got them, and I just can't think of the off the top of my head. But yeah, they're just basically, oh hey, we published that book 25 years ago as a different company. Let's just do it again. And I think that really kind of sucked the soul out of a lot of these books because they had an opportunity to create something new. Like I don't mind them, bringing stuff from the past and updating it and throwing it into like having Tomb of Horrors in one of the adventure books. But ultimately, where's the new stuff? Why have we not got something new? Because it always comes. This is so silly, uh, but it popped into my mind just looking at the map there. I always wanted to know in the north in Greyhawk. There's a place called is it the Land of Black Ice or Ocean of Black Ice or something? And I always wanted to go there, but no one ever wrote an adventure to go there. So why has Wizards not decided, hey, we've got this thing we can do
Mhm.
something with? Hey, let's do some adventures over here. Have we ever done that? No? Okay, great. Let's throw some in. Let's do an adventure over in this corner and over this, like spread out because everyone starts, safe to niche area, but we've done that over and over again. Why can't we start somewhere else that I mean, there's definitely there's wikis that have basically collected all these things
Mhm.
together from all different sources of books here and there that the TSR was printing at the time, Dragon magazine and stuff like that, and saying, hey, the lore is actually a little more lively and a little more populated than we actually know. And anyway, yeah, back to these books. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think they've stayed away from Greyhawk for the most part with 5e. It might have some. There might be some kind of legality, some issues of right
possibly, yeah,
property. I'm not sure entirely what the or some sort of they were offended or something by something Greyhawk did or something. So books from 5e, which I think are useful. Um, the player's handbook for 5e. This is really the main book for the game for 5e now. This has all the rules. Um, and I think it's actually quite well organized. And yeah, I think the team at the beginning did a really good job with the core books for the most part. But this is the only one you really need. Although, if you want to play without spending any money and you want to have a really you can play D&D with the free rules. You don't actually have to even buy this player's handbook. So the free rules, we'll put the link below.
yeah,
Um,
that's a good point.
yeah, and that's been a really great thing that the company did right from the beginning as 5e. They said, here's the free rules, the basic rules if you want to play. The player's handbook, if you want to get one of the books, that's the one you really need because that has the game rules. It has how you create players, and it has the equipment and background and building your character and spells. If you have that book or if you have the basic rules for free, you can play the game. Um, the art, I really don't think is great, and I think that started the trend of the art going kind of downhill. I don't think any of the art is AI, but it kind of reminds me of this AI to a certain extent, the way the styles are done. Um, I can think of one. I think there's one image of there in a one piece of with a displacer beast. I think that one is actually quite good. Yeah, but overall, I'd have to say I was disappointed in what they did, and there seems to be an agenda in the art too. What things they will depict, which is interesting.
Well, the
Uh,
big issue that really comes up for me is the artwork that I grew up loving was the black, the dark grays, the sort of That to me,
Yeah,
when I think of D&D, I still think of that imagery.
right.
I don't necessarily think of the watercolor oil paint. Like when as a teenager, I really liked what like the covers of the novels and things like that, which were all very much sort of paintings.
Hmm.
And but then when 5e came out, when I first picked up my first book, actually, not long after I started playing in West of the Wood, um, I saw the new artwork, and it didn't resonate to the same level that, because I was still thinking in the having like almost basically like black and white drawings depicting this stuff. Now, so they looked a little weird, obviously, but that was also the era of printing and all that kind of stuff. But I hadn't thought of the stuff of what they will depict and what they won't in the current
Hmm.
artwork. And not to mention, isn't the latest book, weren't they doing some naughty with AI art?
Yeah, the latest book, there is AR art, and they say basically they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely certain groups of people they won't depict either, which is interesting, because they've talked a lot about diversity. And another book which is not as key, but I think is useful because of the fact it has basically all of the treasure and the magic items, is the new Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah.
There's also some useful world building tables in there. There's a great bunch of maps. There's a cartographer called Mike Schley. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Anyway, he's really good, and he's done a lot of maps recently for D&D. And the maps in the Dungeon Master's Guide are amazing. I love those 3D maps of like little towns and villages, and he does those really, really well. There's one of a town that has a wall, and it gives you a really good idea of what a medieval town would be like. And yeah, it has, again, it repeats a lot of things that were in the original Dungeon Master's Guide, but
Yeah.
it's useful. It's not as important as having the player's handbook, but it's useful. I also just remember on watching a video recently about how I heard this person complaining again that D&D is complicated. I don't get that, because I know 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds who play D&D. Um, I don't think that's true. It can get complicated, as you go up. Maybe if you're an 18th level wizard and you have tons of spells and magic items and you have a private army that you're paying, and um, but I think overall it's not a complicated game. So
No, it's not.
the basic book you need to run the game, again, either the free basic rules or the player's handbook. Dungeon Master's Guide is kind of a nice bonus. So if you want to add that in. And the monster manual, the new one, has all the classic creatures for the most part. The bio write-ups for the monsters, the lore is actually pretty good, although there's a bit of fluff on there too. Um, and the art, I would say, is okay. Part of art obviously is going to be a personal taste, right? Styles.
Yeah.
So, like for me, I love fantasy, but Skyrim for me is my style of art. Where Final Fantasy, I couldn't get into it.
Yeah. No,
Just
it's
because of
not
the
my
art
thing either.
style, right? So art is subjective.
Yeah.
The monster manual, this guy, it has 400 monsters, the basic monsters, and again, not totally um, necessary, because the free rules include well over 100 monsters. But if you want to have art to show your players as well, I think that book was done fairly well. I think the original books for 5e are pretty decent, and the player's handbook is the key one. Another good one overall is the Volo's Guide. I got the alternative cover because this is one of the few 5e art pieces I like.
Nice.
It has this amazing mind flayer on it. So the beginning of this book has a fantastic section of lore on iconic D&D monsters, giants, beholders, hags. It's really good. And The rest of it, there's some great monsters in there. Um, but that beginning part, I would say, is really worth it. And the news is too that they are not printing this book again. They're they've stopped printing it, and they've stopped printing the Mordenkainen Tome of Foes, which came out around the same time. And they've taken all those creatures and they put them in another book and changed them and got rid of the great lore section from Volos, which is the only real, that's the really good part of that book. And they've got rid of it because they say it's problematic, which I simply can't take that seriously because
I-
it's a game, as we mentioned, and these are fantasy creatures.
But
So
but but I can't imitate a millennial or whatever
the
the
best,
generation is doing this.
the best 5e supplement if you want an extra book, and we talk about this all the time, Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So most people, when I tell them I like this book, they'll say, oh yeah, because of the subclasses, because there's a few extra subclasses. There's some cool subclasses, but most of them, I don't think they really add that much to the game. But the character creation part of this book, the extra
Yes.
character creation part, can add so much to your characters as a player or an NPC. The list of names in the back of this book is just amazing for characters. They have human names from many different cultures, from Greek, from German, from India, all over the world, different names you could use. Then they have different races like elves and dwarves and gnomes and halflings. It's, it's such a useful list. Um, there's a great section in encounter tables, which I noticed came out, sort of a year after our company started publishing these books all the time with encounters. Suddenly, they decided to make a book like that. Although, as we mentioned, there's no encounters for dungeons.
Yeah,
Zero.
I mean that you and I have talked about that before. Like that is such a weird thing considering the title of the game. But I agree. Like Xanathar is like that. I think that was the third book I got. I picked up when I first came back to the game. I picked up the player's manual. I play or handbook, and then I picked up the. I think I picked up the monster manual next, and
Mhm.
then the DM's guide, and then the one right after that was Xanathar, because I was creating a character, and I think at your table somebody mentioned Xanathar's book, or you had it on the table or whatever. And I'm like, what is that?
Yeah,
And I'm so glad I got it. I'm so glad I got the Tome of Foes too. Like, what the heck? But
it's yeah, it's so good. There it also has a bunch of common magic items. So these are very cleverly made and simple, and they add so much to a game. One is called the Cloak of Billowing. So the only magical power it has is you can make it billow in the air, like there's wind, like your cloak is blowing in the wind. There's one that's a tankard of sobriety that no matter how much alcohol you put in there and drink, you can't get intoxicated.
why have my characters not found this? Oh my
Well,
god, that's so
because
brilliant.
I wouldn't want you guys to get your hands on that because I like when you're intoxicated.
Well, you're just
But
like saying, could you please roll a Constitution save?
exactly, exactly. Um, but they're very clever, very simple, and they add so much. Um, a great example how sometimes simple is better.
Yeah,
And the other part I love are rules for tool proficiencies and skills, which we've done an entire episode about if you look back.
yeah.
It's really useful for characters. So a book for DMs and players, the best supplement in 5e, not even close, in my opinion. And Shane likes it too. So
Yeah,
books
I
to
do.
avoid, well, basically everything else. Um, the Sword Coast book, I like sections of Forgotten Realms, but as a lore book about a setting, I don't find it that useful. There's a lot of fluff in there, in my opinion. Um, I know a lot of people disappointed with that book. There's a book called Tasha's Guide, which I'm really sad that I bought because I never will look at it again. And the same with Fizban's Dragon book. I was so disappointed. There's one section in that Dragon's book that's useful about the dragon's personality and their hoard and their lair, but I would never have paid whatever I paid, 50, $60, or sometimes those books are $70 in Canadian. Um, and then the rest, and then the Tome of Foes, there's some cool monsters. Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, another monster book, but overall, I wasn't super jazzed about that. The adventures, most of the campaign adventure books, a lot of them are remakes, like you said, especially the first few books they put out. I found the Giants Adventure, Storm King Thunder, that one is okay. Um, the best one, I think, is the Out of the Abyss, maybe partially because I love the underworld. And I love the Drow society and Duergar, and that whole world is so much fun. I mean, that we did a whole book on the underworld, Monsters of the Underworld. The other ones, and I've read most of them. I enjoy the original adventures much more, and they're all available, as I said, on drive-through. I think pretty much every single one of them is available, and you can even get printed versions. These original soft cover, we used to call them modules back in the day. So this is
Yep.
this is one of the first. For some people, this was the first one they ever played, the Keep on the Borderlands,
Yeah.
and they were these little soft cover booklets, and they were often about 20 or 30 pages, not that big, but they're really quality and fun, lots of action, and I would definitely recommend those more than the new adventures. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview. There's some really useful official books for sure.
Oh, exactly. And I think that, I mean, I miss things that, like one of my favorite books ever, um, was Marvelous Magic, which had a lot of fascinating, magical objects, and things like that.
Was that second edition?
I think it was, if memory serves.
Right.
I
Oh, that
remember
reminds me.
buying it. Oh yeah.
I was just going to say there is another resource book, and I have it right on the shelf here. There's another one from 1E that first edition that has some useful um, elements. It was quite popular. It was a resource that came out probably early 80s. This Unearthed Arcana.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but the marvelous, it was called Marvelous Magic. You said?
Marvelous Magic. It was a book of magical items, and I think you're right. I think it was second edition
Okay.
when it came out. Um, but I think my most favorite, absolute hands down, when I was a kid, was Rogue's Gallery.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Which I still, and by the way, I still have my copies of those two books, thankfully. Uh, Rogue's Gallery was just a very simple book. It was basically tables of character roles and things, and it wasn't flashy. It wasn't fancy. It was just like, hey, do you want a thief? Here you go. Do you want a rogue? Here you go. And here's a list of I think every list had like 10 or maybe 20 or something. But I that was my go-to book for years. And then I stopped playing because I don't know, discovered girls or something. But then when I came back, I was happy that I opened up my collection of books that I still had, uh, and those two were still there.
Wow.
And I, you know, I try not to open the Rogues Gallery too often because it's old. Marvelous Magic, I actually probably every few months I'll open it up and actually look because I remember as a kid, I was probably 12, 13 when I got that one. Maybe a little bit older. Uh, but I still get a chuckle to this day. Barrel of Monkeys. It's
Oh
just a
yeah.
wooden barrel, and if you open it up, out come monkeys, and the DM rolls what there's like I think 5 or 6 different uh, you know species of monkey that can come out of it, like from baboons to like little tiny ones, and but yeah, just that kind of stuff. I love those kinds of things. It's like your monsters books. It's like all of these things because I always and I harp about this all the time, but that sort of lived in feel of the world you're playing in. And if you have a resource book that has unique items that are not in the DM's book, they're not in things, but they are useful. Even if you don't use their stats, or even if you don't use them the way that they're written, because second edition kind of thing, but it gives you that the creative juices again of something else to be like, hey, it's like looking at tables. People look at books with tables and tables of different things you can roll. The reality is, unless you running the game or the player that gets to roll on a table, there's going to be something in those books that is going to influence not just the player, but it's going to influence the story in potentially ways that are not uh, going to that no a DM might not have thought of, players might not have thought of. Like I remember out of necessity, you were playing. We were playing. I've forgotten what the adventure was, but I think it was in the underworld with the exploding beer fountain.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh, and that I seem to recall you mentioning that was actually a necessity because somebody wasn't there, and you
Yeah.
had no way to really kind of explain where because we were in a dungeon in a very large room, and you were like, oh yeah, so then suddenly an explosion from the floor, and I think it was beer, right? Was it beer?
Yeah, it was in the world of Mir. You were dealing with this hag who kept disappearing because she could turn invisible. And you finally had figured out that if you found out where she was and you circled a group of people around her and then you used something to make her appear, then she couldn't get away. So it happened to be a geyser of beer from the a magical bean. That part was spontaneous, but the
Yeah,
circle of people wasn't. And then the beer covered the hag, which revealed her, but it also enabled me to shoot one of the characters out of
exactly.
the circle of people into the river nearby and get their character out of the session because that player wasn't there that day. So
Yeah. And these things, like
yeah,
all of these things combined, resource books are very good for it. And no matter the age of the book, because I'm thinking back to all the books that I've had over the years and still wish I had. Oh my lord. But knowing that you can get those printed again or a whole bunch of them, the modules, like I have my Against the Giants is like you open it up and there's it's worn through on the edge and things like that.
yeah,
I might stick that away and go get another one, get just a soft
right.
cover print. I mean, these
Yeah, there's
books
scarab
are
eating
so
beetles crawling off it, and there's wraps from the mummy that it was when it was in the tomb. Yeah, it's being hidden away for so long. Yeah,
and that's the
I
thing.
don't know anything with second to fourth edition, so that's why those haven't been mentioned. But also, if we did do that, this video would be like
40
2
hours long.
hours long. um,
Well, I don't have any uh books from third edition, fourth edition at all. Like those
um,
I was not playing at that
yeah,
point.
yeah,
And I also don't like the art on the
yeah,
covers.
yeah,
I hate it. It's
yeah,
like I'm buying a book of marble with like stupid etchings on it and jewels. What?
yeah. Yeah, yeah, for the art for me too. I mean, I like some of the most of the first edition art, not all of it. And that's pretty much it for the most part. Which is one reason again we tried a different art style with our books. Um, you mentioned Rogues Gallery. That one I believe you can't get in print for some reason with Drive Through, who have the rights to all this TSR stuff. Um, but you could get a PDF. I think I still have the PDF from them. And that was a great NPC/PC. Like if you wanted a pre-generated character, that was a classic. It was a very small book, but like you say, extremely useful. Um,
I think it has 200 and overall. I think it was like
oh, was it?
250. tables, something like that. I'd have to go and look again. I mean,
Okay,
I
I thought
remember it being like a
smaller.
million, but it wasn't
Oh,
that many.
really? And yeah, maybe I'm wrong. I haven't looked at it for a long time, but I thought it
Hang
was like
on.
a 30, 40 page book. Yeah, I could look up the PDF too. And that book really was inspiration for the NPC books that we've made, which are mostly on sale at Drive Through and on the DMs Guild. We made a ton of NPC books. You have hundreds of NPCs that you can use there, or they're pre-made characters for your players with tons of detail. So we give things like all the equipment, the background, um, the appearance of the creature character, and it'd be a good resource for your players or for the dungeon master.
So yeah, here we go. So my computer doesn't zone it out. So here's the Rogues
Yeah,
Gallery, and yeah, it's only about 48 pages. No,
yeah.
yeah,
Like you say, there's a lot crammed in there. I remember that.
yeah, because there's like tables like that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some more specific, characters that have backstories and things. Um, and here's actually Marvelous Magic. I grabbed it anyway just because it was there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've never
So,
seen that. I've never seen
but
that in my life. So,
but yeah,
yeah.
it's got look at that. So it has like alphabetic. It's organized by letter and different
Wow.
sort of things. It also apparently has a monsters sticker in it for some reason. Didn't know I
That's
put it in there.
the demon snail, I believe,
The
from
demon
Monsters
snail.
of the Underworld.
So yeah, so it has like, and it has the artwork that I really enjoy, which is stuff. Good lord, stuff like, come
The
on,
black
computer.
and white.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
black and white sort of stuff.
Black
But
and
yeah,
white
I mean, there's
70s, 80s.
so
Yeah.
these are all books, and I thought I would just show this one off because it has a lot of cool stuff in it still.
Yeah.
But yeah, you listening or you watching, hi, how are you? Um, you guys need to source your books, get the basic core stuff. There's no need to get all of the sort of extraneous things, but there are definitely ones like the ones we've talked about today, Volo, Xanathar, Mordecai, like those kinds of books do actually give you a lot of flavor and do give you additional things, like especially Xanathar's Guide to Everything. That's a really important book. Every time I create a character, that book is always on the table. And there's all kinds of things you can get. Do you need to get the first edition stuff? It'd be cool. But not necessary. And who knows what the future holds for what kind of books are coming out. I think that you should be buying everything from Cawood Publishing because those monster books are amazing, and the World of Mirror book that's going to be coming out. I guess it'll be best case scenario summer next year, roughly.
So as far as the scheduling, the new book Monsters of the Dungeons just being finished, that will go to the Kickstarter people um, this month as a PDF, and then we'll try to get the printed books probably this month and next month. Those will be, hopefully the shipping will begin, and then the Kickstarter for World of Mir should be the end of kind of middle of November. So the end date for the Mir book is more likely probably April, I would say, maybe earlier, because we do a lot more work earlier on now. Like this new book, this dungeon book has been done quickly. It was only kickstarted in May. Okay, it was kickstarted in May, and we're getting a book with 123 monsters, hardcover book, color, fully illustrated to the people. They're going to get the PDF, probably within the next couple of weeks, and then the hardcover books soon after that. That's very quick turnaround for a team of 3 people. So the World of Mir book A lot of it is done, but we have to do some more work on that. Probably probably April probably April or May next year. It might be sooner, but that's the most likely. And again, we'd have the PDF done earlier, and then the printed books take a little bit longer to organize. As far as the monster book being released publicly, there's a chance that could happen before Christmas or the beginning of the new year. That's when we'll release Monsters of the Dungeon PDF and the printed book versions at the same time. So we're going to do that either right after this latest Kickstarter or first thing next year.
That's kind of awesome.
And then the World of Mir book, hopefully in the spring, it'll be ready. And then our big plans for next year is that we're going to start to be an adventure factory.
Which is, I mean, that's like we've talked about, like it is really fun and exciting to have world building books. It's really fun and exciting to have monsters, but it's kind of like right now they're kind of all hanging out in the cafeteria. They're like, hey guys, yeah, I'm totally going to kill you next time. All right, guys, I'll get you. But yeah, the adventure stuff, I mean, that's kind of why I really want Wizards to create their own thing, to actually have new adventures in places that are, somewhat familiar. But for World of Mir, it's going to be awesome because I've done, I think, one run through of A through what are they called? Oh my lord, the adventure
A1
books
to
you
4?
wrote. A1 through 4
The
or 1
Slave
through.
Lords series?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Your adventure books.
That we have the World of Mir adventures. So that's A1 to 16. So it's it's 8 books. Actually, I have to double check again how many books are in that series. Actually, well, I can't look right here because it's listed at the front of these books.
Oh, there we go.
It takes you from levels 1 to 20, and it's A1 to I was right, A1 to 16. And it's an adventure series, a whole campaign that takes you from first level to 20th. This time our adventures, we're going to have better layout, more art, all in color. And we're going to be working with Travis again. And and I think it's going to be something very unique. And we plan on doing many of them a year instead of just one. We've usually had one big book a year. Although this year we're going to probably have 2. Once we've done the world book, then these adventure books, we're going to have multiple releases during the year.
Well, I'm excited for that because I really want more. I want more. That's basically it. I just want more. But anyway, we've been talking for a while, everybody. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. Everything we've talked about, any important links, all that kind of stuff, will be right down below. And if you have any suggestions, questions, comments, or complaints, send them to Andrew. And we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Later.